school. It was a convent school, and it went from you were like 4 years old to like 12 years old, and the first 2 years were like called low infants and high infants, and then you went from first class to sixth. We had nuns. We had a couple of nuns. We had three nuns, and the rest were lay teachers. But one teacher had two classes. Like first and second was taught by one teacher, and the second and third was another, and fourth and fifth was another. Or I mean, fifth and sixth was another. So for 2 years you were with the same teacher in primary school. The rest of the convent was the secondary school for years and years, but before I got to secondary school they had closed that part of the convent, and they built a new school, built a new secondary school. So it was St. Clair's College, and then you went there for 5 years, which a nun was the principal as well. It was a convent school too, but the nun was the principal, and there was a couple other nuns, but the rest were lay teachers.
What was the order of nuns?
St. Clair's, daughter of St. Clair's.
And was it an all-girls school at the secondary level?
No, it was a mixed school. It was boys and girls. The primary school was an all-girls school, and then there was a boys' school in the town, and it was St. Teresa's boys' school. So, but the primary school was all girls.
Did you wear uniforms?
It was not in primary school. You could wear whatever you wanted, but when you got to fifth and sixth class, you weren't allowed. Girls weren't allowed to wear pants. They had to wear skirts. So they did, or dresses.
Why?
But I don't know. That was the rule. The nun had that rule. So I guess you were growing up, But in secondary school we had uniforms. So they were navy and white. So,
What did you do for fun?
At what age?
Well, tell me a few things you did for fun, as a child and as a teenager, as a young woman.
As kids, you'd play half the day. Our neighbours were cousins of ours. They lived about a mile away from us. We practically grew up in each other's houses. And we'd go off for the day and we wouldn't be seen from morning till night. It was like we're sent off. We were never worried where we went, but they lived, where they lived, we'd play between their house and ours, and sometimes, I don't know how we weren't killed with some of the things we did. There was an old quarry and we used to take on to learn how to swim. None of us could swim and it was really deep. We were also going rafting one day, which we were making our own raft. We used a pallet, a big pallet. We forgot that there's holes between each thing, and it ended up sinking to the bottom. So it did. But also, there was an old lady lived between our house and their house, and it was in the middle of nowhere. And she lived there. I think I've told you this story. She lived there with her handicapped brother.
I don't think you've told me, so please tell me.
And they were old, and she had no electricity when we were young, and she had an oil lamp, and she had this dog which really smelled. He was so bad, and the hair grew over his eyes. You weren't allowed to touch him. He'd bite you if you touched him, but if you didn't go near him, he'd walk round by you. But she used to watch out for us when we'd be coming from our cousins, because she always loved us come in and chat with her. And we'd try and sneak round by our house so she wouldn't see us, because she'd keep us there all night. And it'd always be getting dark when we'd be going home. And back then, when we were kids, it didn't get dark till like 11 o'clock at night, maybe after it sometimes. So we could be coming home at like 10 or 11 o'clock at night in the summertime. And she'd bring us in, she'd start telling us ghost stories. And by the time she'd be finished telling us the ghost stories, she'd have to walk with us nearly the whole way home because we were afraid of her life. So we were to go home. And so, things that she told us. And I think she was just as afraid as we were. She frightened herself. So she did. But she'd have to come up with the oil lamp. She'd bring the oil lamp with her and walk to the end of the lane. But she finally got electricity. And she was amazed, She was amazed at this new revelation. Well, she got a telephone. And over there, when you're elderly, pension age, I guess there's certain things you get free. Telephone was one thing, and TV and electricity. But she'd never seen a TV before. And the only thing she watched was the news. 9 o'clock news. She'd sit there watching the news, and when it would be nearly over, she'd get up and she'd stand next to the TV. And the lady'd say, and a very good night to you all. And she'd go over to the TV and she'd go, and a very good night to you too. Boom! And she'd push the button and turn it off. But it was like the lady was talking to her. So it was, and she was afraid to answer the telephone. She was afraid of it. Every time it would ring, she'd nearly jump out of her skin. So she would. But she still, even though she had electricity, she still lit the lamp. She still lit it for a long, long time after. But she also, when the brother was there, she used to smoke. And when she'd light up a cigarette, the brother would stand up, and he had this habit of rubbing his pants, and the whole legs of his pants were shiny because he rubbed them so much. But he'd stand up when she'd go to have a cigarette and open his mouth, and she'd blow the smoke into his mouth. So she would.
What did you think of that?
We'd stand there staring at them. So we would. But she was a very nice old lady. She was really nice, though. And she used to make tea for us, and she had these tiny little cups that were like pink and yellow cups. And she'd ask us, how many sugars? And we'd be like, none, thanks. She'd put like 2 or 3 big spoons of sugars in the tea, and the rest of half of it would be full of milk. We wouldn't be able to drink it, but you'd have to try and drink it because it'd be rude not to drink it. So, but she always had cakes or biscuits or something. She always kept them when we were coming. So she did.
What was her name?
Mary McCahill. That was her name. She was never married, but I was home at Christmas time, and my brother and my cousin, they went down snooping around the old house. She's long dead now, and her daughter and husband owned the house and the land. It's funny because she adopted 2 children, which was unheard of like years ago for somebody who was never married to adopt kids. But she adopted 2 girls, and I asked my godmother about this because I was wondering how she, got to adopt children. And she said years ago, if kids were orphaned or had no home, what they did was they sent them to families who, even though they weren't married, if they could provide for them, they sent them. So these 2 girls they're not real sisters, but they've grown up as sisters. But my brother went down, and my cousin snooping around the house. So they did. One day, the 2 of them were in there, and one of my cousins, he went blind when he was 19. My brother had him outside on guard while he was inside. It was like the blind leading the blind. So he did. He was supposed to be the lookout in case anybody came, and then this in the middle of nowhere. So it is. But the 2 of them are inside. I think the 2 of them are 28, 29, 30 years old. The 2 of them are inside, and they're whispering. And they're saying, whispering and talking about stuff. And then my cousin says to my brother, he says, why are we whispering? It's like there was nobody for miles. So there wasn't. But the 2 of them, pair of clowns, they found they found these letters, and there was a whole load of dirty magazines. So there was, but I'm sure the dirty magazines weren't the old ladies, because people probably go up there and go into the house. But there was old letters. There was letters from this man that we used to see her, court her, like when she was young. And it was very funny. The letters that the letters were, he went to England and he was sending over money so that she could go over to him, but she never did. But one of the letters asked, "Did you get your new false teeth yet?" So my godmother kept the letter, so I was reading it when I was at home. It was very funny. But they meant to go back and have another look to see if they find more, but they never got a chance. Yet. No.
So what else did you do for fun?
And then as we got older, when like teenagers, when we started going out, I went to Jersey one year over in the Channel Islands to my aunt and uncle live over there. One of my father's sisters is married over there. I went over to her when I was like 14 for the summer. Got totally sunburned. So I did. But when I started going out, then we started going to discos. There was no taxis back then, so everyone hitched lifts. So, but you always went in bunches, you know, you went in groups.
Were you safe?
So yeah, it was different then than now. You know, it was much safer, and everybody knew each other because you come from small communities, so everyone knew each other. And I had older brothers, so you know they always watched out for you too. So you know you're pretty safe.
How far would you go? Would you go as far as Dublin, for instance, or just to Cavan?
No, not to discos. No, in Cavan, about 10 mile away from where I come from, there was a big discotheque, and we used to go there. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere too. It's in this tiny little village, which has like 2 pubs and 1 shop, and this big discotheque. I guess it was a good idea putting it in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't going to disturb anyone, but it's still there. So that's.
Were you involved in sports?
When I was a kid, we used to play soccer at home. Growing up with brothers, one of them was a soccer nut. He just, you know, every week it was like all the neighbour kids gathered and they used to play soccer on a Saturday. And if there was one team short a player, I used to have to play. I never wanted to all the time, but if I didn't play, I got killed. If I did, I got killed. So I didn't have much choice. So, but I used to play camogie at school.
And what is that?
It's the ladies. It's like women's version of hurling. So it's the same, only it's ladies playing.
And what position did you play?
Oh, sometimes you were put in all positions, but I was goalie at one time, and then I was left back at another time. So it's but played for a couple of years at school. Camogie and volleyball. Played a lot of volleyball too. So, but there wasn't a lot of sports for girls. Camogie was probably the biggest. When I was at school. So I don't know how it's changed. You know, camogie is still pretty big.
And can you tell me a little bit about camogie, because I don't really understand the rules of hurling?
Well, the ball is called a slitter. It's made out of leather. It's hard as a rock, and the stick is called a hurley, or in Irish it's called a come on. Hurley or camogie, which is similar, like goes back to the time of Satanta. Satanta is like the legendary kid who killed the hound of Cuchulainn, and he became Cuchulainn's protector, the the hound was Cuchulain's protector, and he killed the hound because the hound went to attack him. He hit the sliotar with the hurley and hit the sliotar into the hound's mouth and choked the hound. So Cuchulain then hired him to be his protector. So it goes back, it's way back to that time. Setanta is actually the sports network.
Really?
It's called Setanta, the Irish Sports Network.
And hurling is the national sport of Ireland?
Hurling and Gaelic football.
And Gaelic football.
Yeah, Gaelic football too. They're different than the games here. Hurling and football, they have points and goals. A goal is worth 3 points, which it has to go below the goal post. It has to go between the net for a goal, and over the bar is a point. If it goes over the bar, in both games. So it's kind of a little different than any other sports.
It's kind of a rough sport, isn't it?
Actually, it's very skillful. So it is, and it's not really that rough. It's more skillful. People wear helmets now, but years ago they never wore helmets when they played hurley.
And do they stop the action very often, or does it just keep going?
It's very fast. It's very fast paced. So it is. If you which most people are very skilled that come to that level, the county levels. Each county plays against each other, and until it comes down to 2 teams, which is the final, and then the champions, the All Ireland finals.
Who do you root for?
Oh, my own county, Cavan, of course.
What are Cavan's colours?
Blue and white. Blue and white are the Cavan colours.
Now, were you involved in drama and dance in school?
Not very much. There was a couple of musicals. There was one, Deirdre. They did Deirdre Sorrows, and I was in the chorus group. I wasn't in the actual acting. I was in the chorus. It was more things associated with the choir and things like that I was involved with. They did a couple of shows that were performed in the town hall in Cavan Town, and that was like a big thing. But there wasn't a lot when I went to school. There was a lot more before I was in secondary school. There was a lot more before that. There wasn't as much when I was in there.
Okay. Did you speak Irish at home?
We spoke some Irish at home. Like, you learned Irish from you were very young. You were taught it at school, and it was part of the school curriculum, you know. But there's certain words that always was said in Irish. Like, milk is banya. Bread is a ron. Colleen is girl. There's certain things, you know. Buckle is boy. But also, when you were a kid, there was other words that aren't really in the Irish language, like Gawson was a boy, and Gahla was a girl, which really isn't in the Irish dictionary at all. So there's certain words that were probably made up, and it depends what part of Ireland you come from too. The Irish is a little different in certain parts of Ireland, from the south, from the north, and the east and west. It differs a little bit, some of the words and the pronunciations and spellings.
Okay.
So it does. But we weren't fluent Irish speakers because we didn't come from a Gaeltacht area. So we didn't, because we were near Northern Ireland. So actually, in our area years and years ago, Irish was banned. When my grandmother when she was at school, She didn't learn any Irish at all because it was totally banned. The English had banned it from all the schools, and unless you went to a hedge school, which was practically at night outside, like behind some ditch somewhere, you know, some of the teachers were trying to teach the kids the Irish, but she didn't have a word of Irish at all. But then my father's time, they did.
And they went to regular school.
And they went to school until, it was different then. They went to school till they were 14, and they finished school at 14. And he finished at 14, but he was supposed to go on and go to, like, it'd be near like a college for 2 years, but seemingly my grandfather wanted him to work on the land, and he didn't get going to school. But I guess that he was recommended to go on to the next level, but he never did. So I think it was a bit of a teacher's pet. So,
was he the oldest son? Is that why he wanted?
No, actually, there was one older, and he went to the service in England. He joined the English Army, and he fought in World War II and got killed. He got killed in Lithuania, and I think it was Lithuania. Actually, no, it was Tunisia. He got killed in Tunisia in World War II, and